On with infection, we have Chlamydia, rickettsia, and Mycoplasms. These three are small, obligate intracellular parasites. They do not grow on artificial media. They have to grow inside of the cells, and they have similarities to both bacteria and viruses. Evolutionarily, they're thought of as bacteria that have lost their ability to live outside of their host, and they lack some basic components. But they do replicate inside of the cell through binary fission within the host cell. Chlamydia is actually a common cause of sexually transmitted disease and can result in infertility. Rickettsia is a gram-negative bacteria that is transmitted through insects like lice and ticks. And then mycoplasms are the smallest, and they even lack a cell wall, and some of them can cause atypical type of pneumonia. Okay. The next microorganism can actually get really large, and we see it sometimes in the yard as a mushroom. These are eukaryotic organisms. That means they have a nucleus, and they're found throughout their environment, on animals, plants, humans, and foods. Fungal infections or mycotic infections can occur from a single cell yeast or from multicellular molds. Very few fungi are actually pathogenic. The ones that are pathogenic usually are in the skin or mucous membranes, but they can infect systemically the whole body for those that are severely immunosuppressed, like an AIDS patient or those on chemotherapy or severely immunosuppressed. Here you see a yeast infection of the mouth, and here's the cells of the yeast, the large cells that have nuclei, and we can see the yeast infection in the mouth, which is called thrush in a small child, or yeast infection. A few examples of fungal diseases are histoplasma, which can cause neurological disease when it's transmitted to the embryo or fetus. If the mother is infected, histoplasmosis. Tinea pedis is athlete's foot. Candida is can cause thrush or vaginitis. It's yeast. It's usually harmless, but it can be opportunistic if the condition is right in the vagina or the mouth. Pneumocystis gyrovesi is also another opportunistic organism causing pneumonia, and it has characteristics of fungi and some of protozoa. Again, opportunistic means that it normally doesn't occur unless the opportunity turns just perfect. Well, not perfect, but gets close to its ideal environment. Protozoa are another type of eukaryotic microorganism. These lack a cell wall and they're unicellular. Many live independently in the environment, but others are obligate parasites. The pathogens are usually the ones that are parasites. Some examples of protozoal diseases is trichomonas, moniasis, malaria, and amoebic dysentery. A few other agents of disease. These aren't microorganisms because they're too large. Are helminthes, which are flatworms or roundworms. They're not microorganisms, they're too big. They are parasites, and they can be small, but as they grow, they can grow up to even 1 meter in length. The life cycle includes 3 stages: the ovum, which is the egg, the larva, which is the immature pupae, and then the adult. They usually enter the body through either the skin or by ingestion, depending on what species they are. They're typically found more in children, but cut through the ingestion through the fecal oral route. And the infection can be life-threatening for those that are immunosuppressed. So a few Hemoth diseases are pinworms, hookworms, tapeworms, and ascaris. Pinworms have small oval inhaled in dust in fecally contaminated areas. It's common in children worldwide, and they're down there putting everything in their mouth, and then they get pinworms. Hookworms, the larvae enter through the skin from fecally contaminated soil, primarily in tropical areas, so walking around in fecal material, not good. And then tapeworms, which are a common form transmitted by larvae in undercooked pork. So if a tapeworm is in pork, it gets in the muscle of the pig, and then if you don't cook it to the right temperature, the tapeworms can live and can infect a person. And then ascaris is a giant roundworm that is ingested from foods that have been grown in feces contaminated soil, or prepared with hands with feces that have been in feces contaminated soil. So kind of have to worry about where there's feces or in the fields, or they're using excess manure and things like that, and then we don't have enough rain, and the rain washes or floods and it gets feces in the material. Another type of infectious agent is a prion. This is neither any of the other ones. This is actually a protein. Just a protein. It's not even an organism. It's a protein-like agent that protein will change the shape of other proteins in host cells. These are transmitted by contaminated tissues, such as the ingestion of meat or infected blood or donor organs. These can cause degenerative diseases of the nervous system, such as mad cow's disease. And this is where the protein is ingested and it gets into the brain tissue, the nervous tissue, and then it starts causing the normal proteins to turn into the prion proteins. And some examples are the Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease and the variant Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. These are both rapidly progressive and fatal. Like I said, mad cow disease is an example. Our body does have a lot of resident flora. We actually have more foreign cells, foreign bacteria, than we do have our own cells. And we have our own resident microflora, termed the normal flora. And they're in our skin, our nasal cavity, our mouth, gut, vagina, and urethra. So it's all over the body, the outside of the body, and in these mucous membranes. And they're healthy for us. If we look here, we can see some ways that infectious agents are transmitted. So here's one. We'll start at the top and work our way around. So we can see that a needle gives direct access to the blood. If it's contaminated, it can go in there and transmit disease. Injury can allow opportunistic organisms to invade. Bites, stings, and worms can all be vectors and transmit diseases. Animals, sexual intercourse, contaminated water and soil can be ingested or can go through the skin. Poultry, eggs, utensils, all these are fomites. Inanimate objects, oral or nasal secretions, and our hands, whatever infection agents. So there's lots of ways we can become infected. Okay. A term of one type of infection that occurs in health facilities. Nosocomial infections are the ones that occur in healthcare facilities, hospitals, nursing homes, physicians' offices, and dental offices. About 10 to 15% of the patients that go into the hospital for one thing end up getting infected with another thing. And this is because there are many microbes present in these situations. Patients with undiagnosed infectious disease can be shared their diseases with others. The environment is shared, and often the treatment for a lot of the disorders can weaken the immune response. And then the healthcare workers and the fomites, such as door handles and bathrooms and things like that, can act as reservoirs that transfer the diseases around. Host resistance and microbial virulence. How do we resist infection? That's host resistance. And then how does the microorganisms cause problems? Virulence. Okay, so things that we can do to resist infection include having intact skin and mucous membranes. We also have things, you think about your lines of defense. Stomach acid interiors. That's the first line. Our second line of defense is nonspecific phagocytosis and inflammation. Okay, and then our third line of defense is the immune system with the antibodies and the cell-mediated responses. Okay, that's how we resist. Now, how does microorganism cause problems or diseases? Well, they can produce endotoxins and exotoxins. They can produce destructive enzymes. They can form spores. Okay, and that helps them resist the immune system. They can enter the body in various different ways. They can have a bacterial capsule and pili to help them attach or to invade our immune response. Okay. Factors that decrease host resistance. Well, age. Infants do not have the same immunity build up as we get older and get more and more infections. We have build up resistance. Older adults lose their resistance. Pregnancy. Genetic susceptibility. Different genetics means you're more prone to certain things. Immunodeficiency is where your immune system is low. Malnutrition and not getting enough nutrition, energy, proteins can depress the immune system. Chronic diseases such as diabetes and heart disease can make it harder to resist infection. Severe physical and emotional stress. Inflammation or trauma. Inflammation, we know if the skin's weak in there, it's easier for the microorganism to infect through the skin. And then also impaired inflammatory responses, like autoimmune disorders. Okay. Virulence and pathogenicity. Pathogenicity is the ability for the microbe to cause disease. So how pathogenic is it? How likely is it to cause disease? Which is what's disease? Going away from homeostasis, so going away from normal. Virulence is the degree of pathogenicity. So how virulent it is, how likely it is to cause disease. So we look at things like the invasive qualities. How easily does it invade tissues and spread? What toxins does it produce to destroy the tissues? How well does it adhere to the tissue and prevents it from being, our immune response from being able to destroy it? What is its ability to avoid the host defenses? New issues affecting infection and transmission. Well, there's constantly new emerging diseases. We just seen this year. In a matter of a few months, we have been through an epidemic of COVID-19, a very specific coronavirus. They're genetically different than the other coronaviruses that we have been affected in the past, and it spreads. There's also other diseases that are normal in certain areas that can spread rapidly if they get out. And then we have also superinfections, which are infections from organisms that's been around for a long time, but they have became resistant to antibiotics and treatments. So things like TB and Staphylococcus aureus or staph, okay, and MRSA, okay. The infection cycle and breaking the chain. So how do we break the chain of infection? Well, we have to find out what the process is for how it spreads, okay, and how it moves around. So how do we break the chain? So we can look for these barriers. And this is really important when you start thinking about what's going on in the world today, is we have a disease, and how do we break the chain of the infection cycle? So if transmission is direct, saliva, blood, fecal, feces, semen, exudates, then barriers such as gloves, glasses, and gowns can stop it from entering into the body. If it's indirect, like respiratory droplets on the hands or surfaces, insect bites, or contaminated food or water, we can do hand washing, disinfect, sterilize, food handling, cooking, and water treatment. Okay? And block entry. One of the other things we're looking for with this coronavirus is immunization. So we can actually use immunization to stop it from entering into the host. Susceptible host. That susceptible host, it can go through an incubation period where it's asymptomatic. And that person can be a carrier and can pass it on. Okay? And these asymptomatic and these carriers can act as a reservoir. And so if they go out into the world, they can act as a reservoir and spread it to others. Okay? And it can and by reducing that reservoir, we can reduce the numbers. And then because it's going to exit out the mouth, skin, and intestines. And when it exits, we can stop it by wearing a mask. So that's just one example. All right, so let's start right here.